I guess I like doing what I do because it is a reminder of like how we are connected to everything on this planet. You know, that we all actually depend on each other, and we depend on, you know, other living things on this planet for our existence, you know. And I think many people kind of lose their connection to the natural world in modern society, and I think that's maybe the one thing that I think is like a good thing that people could learn from what I do.
My guest today is Dr. Pia Viglietti, research scientist at the Field Museum of Natural History. Pia, great to have you today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Paul.
So there have been 5 major extinction events on Earth. Do you think we're currently in the midst of a 6th major extinction event?
Oh wow, we're going there already.
We're going right into it.
Yes, I would say absolutely. Yeah.
And is it safe to say that it's human-induced?
Definitely. I mean, I don't know how much detail you want to go into now, because I feel like talking a bit about the mass extinction event that I study could actually provide a lot of good context for what we are going through right now. For example, just the tons and tons of carbon dioxide that we are putting into the atmosphere annually. You know, a similar thing was going on at the end of the Permian, only, you know, it was caused by volcanoes erupting in what is now Siberia, so Russia. And at that time, again, it was also tons and tons of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases erupting into the atmosphere. And they caused, you know, this had calamitous effects for the climate, for animals living on land, in the oceans. And these eruptions spanned over 1 million years.
So these extinction events can last billions of years then?
They can. I think, though, they still are regarded as geologically rapid. And I guess maybe to clarify with the end-Permian mass extinction event, that sure, these eruptions happened over the course of 1 million years, scientists think, but the, I guess, peak of the extinction was probably over a shorter period of time. That's definitely the case in the ocean. So, for example, recent paper actually came out saying that the extinction event in the ocean was very rapid, like within hundreds of thousands of years. And the main cause, you know, or the main trigger for the oceanic extinctions were essentially ocean anoxia and ocean acidity. So, which is caused by large amounts of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere being absorbed by the oceans. They can only take in so much, and that has these effects in oceanic ecosystems, alongside warming of the ocean in shallower areas too.
And do we have an idea of the duration of those other extinction events, the other major extinction events?
Yes, I mean, I don't want to say I'm an expert in those extinctions, but they probably followed similar timelines. You know, however, I think, you know, because I guess for people listening to this podcast, these big five mass extinction events, as they're called, there was it was the end-Ordovician, the end-Devonian, and then the end-Permian, which is the one I study, the end-Triassic, and then the end-Cretaceous.
And the one that you study, that had the greatest percentage of extinction of species, correct?
So people probably are most familiar with the end-Cretaceous, which, you know, wiped out the dinosaurs. It's a very dramatic extinction caused by an extraterrestrial bolide impact, or an asteroid basically hitting the Earth. in what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. But the end-Permian was by magnitude way more severe. In the oceans, it was probably 8 out of 10 species went extinct. On land, there's still some debate, but it could be about 9 out of 10 species went extinct on land, although the land extinction may have been a more drawn-out affair in comparison to the ocean.
I think I saw something, or here it's saying, on this table, it was saying 96% of the species were lost.
Yeah.
Is that accurate, you think?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And so most of your fieldwork has been concentrated in the southern region of Africa.
Yeah, correct.
In the Karoo Basin specifically. Can you talk about why the Karoo Basin is so unique and a place where of importance geologically?
Yeah, for this event. So it's probably one of the most well preserved and uninterrupted sequences of the land extinction, of the end-Permian mass extinction event. There are other records, the most well-known being in Russia. But the Karoo really is unrivaled in this sort of uninterrupted sequence of events. And I guess what makes it interesting to people is the animals involved are really kind of unusual. I mean, that's at least what pulled me into it. They're unusual, but they're also our most ancient relatives. They're part of our family of animals, which, are as a group called Synapsids. And mammals, which we are the only living branch of that synapsid family tree. And at the, prior to the end of the Permian, that synapsid family tree was very much alive, and there were diverse groups of animals living in the Permian. And the Karoo is a very good snapshot of that life before the extinction and during and even after.
Well, could you talk about what a disaster taxon is? Why?
I mean, that's also actually very much a debated topic.
Oh, okay.
Because it actually started out as a description of marine taxa that survived the marine extinction. So like bivalves and clams and things like that. I think some brachiopods, although brachiopods really suffered a hit in the oceans. Bivalves kind of took their place. I mean, they look kind of similar, but they're very different, have very different evolutionary, backgrounds. In the context of land animals, people have often referred to an animal called Lystrosaurus as a disaster taxon, because it's one of these, I guess you could call it the poster child of the end-Permian mass extinction event. It seems to thrive in the extinction aftermath. In the Karoo Basin, you are like tripping over Lystrosaurus skulls in the Triassic. Like as you get beyond where we place the Permo-Triassic boundary in the Karoo Basin, you all of a sudden just see Lystrosaurus everywhere. There are bone beds. There are, it's just chocolate Lystrosaurus.
And what does that species look like? Because I know that the name loosely translates to like a shovel reptile, but...
Yeah, it does kind of look like it ran into a wall. It's sort of very, got this very like angled premaxilla or snout. It would have had a turtle-like beak and then tusks.
Oh, tusks.
Yes.
Oh.
So little tusks coming out the sides of the mouth. So probably, kind of unusual looking. I mean, I don't want to say ugly because, Lystrosaurus and me, I have a soft spot for Lystrosaurus.
And what is the size of the species?
So that also depends in space and time, because many, as I said, Lystrosaurus has always sort of been seen as this survivor. It's like appears in the Triassic, or like at least it becomes very abundant in the Triassic, but it does actually first appear in the Permian. And there's one Permian species in the Karoo Basin, and that's the largest. It's like Lystrosaurus mckayi. It had very like elaborate like ornamental bosses at the top of its head, and I would say that one is the most iconic, like slammed into a wall type Lystrosaurus skull, like. And that animal probably would have been, or could have reached like cow-sized. But the others were probably around like pig-sized, or dog, pig or dog-sized. Yeah. And there are 3 species that appear in the Triassic. One is like a boundary crosser, so it just appears before the Permo-Triassic boundary, geologic boundary, I should say, and then doesn't really last much into the Triassic. And then there are 2 sort of smaller pig-sized species that dominate in the Karoo in the Triassic. So they're called Dimetrodon and Murray.
But what makes them, what makes this controversial about labeling them a disaster taxon?
I guess it's just more about like, what do we mean by a disaster taxon? But he was sort of challenging this like definition of like Lystrosaurus being a disaster taxon, and he disagreed with that.
Yeah.
But I guess I still like using the term for Lystrosaurus in a way, because at least in the work that I've been involved in more directly, trying to unravel that like position Lystrosaurus has in the Karoo.
Yeah.
It's it does seem to have a large amount of traits that seem to be advantageous in surviving, or at least even thriving in the conditions causing, extinction in other species, even other dicynodonts, which is what Lystrosaurus is. It's a herbivorous group of synapsids, or it belongs to a herbivorous group of synapsids called dicynodonts. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of the features or characteristics that you...
I guess the main one is burrowing. We find lots of burrows that belong to Lystrosaurus. And that does seem to be a trait that a lot of the survivor taxa share with Lystrosaurus. And we think that, at least in the Karoo Basin, I mentioned these like tons and tons of carbon dioxide being put in the atmosphere caused, many calamitous effects. And how that sort of was felt in the Karoo Basin was, we think, was droughts. So it made the climate more unpredictable and prone to these drought events. So animals were dealing with drought conditions essentially, and heat, and probably seasonal heat, possibly cold as well, because it was high latitude. The Karoo is probably even at a higher latitude than Chicago is right now. Can't exactly remember exactly, but it was like in the 40s or 50s. It was very high latitude. So the burrows were probably some sort of refugia from extreme climatic conditions. So that's one trait. Another is biomechanically, it did seem to have this, quite strong bite. So some people have speculated it was able to eat quite tough vegetation. And we know that, in the Permian, the main large plants were Glossopteris, at least in Gondwana land. So Glossopteris was like a seed-bearing tree fern, or like maybe a seed fern, I should say. And it had these like tongue-like leaves, and was probably the main food source of like large dicynodonts. And when like these climatic changes affected the Karoo Basin, like Glossopteris goes extinct. Like there's these large Gondwanan Glossopteris forests disappear. And instead, while we don't have a good understanding of like what the flora was like, because like body fossils don't always preserve in the same places as plants, and they get very rare in the Triassic Karoo Basin. But what we do see is lots of horsetails, or basically like that's like the main plant that's around, and it's quite like a tough plant. And that probably was like the main source of food. And these animals may or may not have been able to deal with that. Or at least like were generalist in what they could eat.
Any other traits that contributed to their survival, you think?
So these are other things that we are investigating, but one of them could be sort of ontogenetic shifts, which may or may not involve like body size reduction, or like changes to sexual maturity. I think there's actually a paper by a colleague of mine, Jennifer Buerter, that goes into this about like live fast, die young sort of strategy for Lystrosaurus, looking at their bone histology. So that may have been another strategy, that they were just breeding younger and not living as long, because that's also another interesting taphonomic feature of the Lystrosaurus in the Karoo, that not only are they, I guess, smaller species, but they seem to be majority like young animals, so or subadult. We rarely find like fully adult Lystrosaurus fossils.
And why do we think that is?
Well, I guess this may be, I mean, if this is true about their live fast, die young strategy, they may have not been doing so well.
Right.
But this was a way for them to still reproduce before they died off, or died in a drought or some sort of other extreme climatic event that that they were dealing with.
Well, to circle back on the original question about the mass extinction events, what do you think the findings from the Karoo Basin could inform us about what's happening currently?
I think the story of the Karoo Basin is really important for showing us the effects of uncontrolled carbon dioxide emissions, because that, the rock record there really lays bare what happens if you just let it happen in an uncontrolled manner. In the oceans, I'll start there. As I mentioned, there's oceanic warming in the shallows. There's ocean acidification. That results in, at least in the warming of oceans, the bleaching of corals, which we're seeing now. I mean, I think I saw in the news last month even that we breached this planetary boundary that now means coral reefs can't live in our oceans anymore if they're too hot. That happened at the end of the Permian. There was the main reef building corals at that time were called rugose corals, and they also the oceans got too hot for them and they died in those shallow reef environments that like coral reefs live in now. Although they're like the corals that we see in oceans today aren't related to rugose. They're tabulate corals or hexacorals, but I'm not a coral researcher, but and then on land, there were, climates became unpredictable. Extreme extreme climatic events like droughts, floods, wildfires. These are the types of things we see in the rock record, crossing the boundary and as you progress through this mass extinction event. And in the aftermath, you see a large, vacant niches. Animals have gone extinct. Ecosystems are unstable. So, those are just a few examples that I see from my studies on this extinction event that could really be a lesson to us now, and that, or a warning.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we know what the CO2 levels were at the beginning of that million-year extinction event? Do we have any idea of what the CO2 level was at the start of the?
At the peak of the extinction event?
No, at the beginning of it.
I have not seen people really, well, I have seen one paper where they tried to predict what the levels of carbon dioxide were at the peak of the end-Permian mass extinction event, so when they were really high.
Yeah.
And I actually tried to put that on the IPCC report graph. So I don't know if you remember, that came out in 2023, and they were showing our current outputs at like 40 gigatons per annum.
Mm-hmm.
But when I used this paper's like peak amounts, they put the end-Permians at like 20 gigatons. Mm. And at first I was like, what? This can't be right.
Yeah.
But then I was like, and I mean, I may be wrong, but still, it was way lower than what we are emitting. And that's actually horrifying.
Right, yeah.
And there was still such a horrific extinction event that, sure, it happened over millennia, but, 9 out of 10 species went extinct. Mm-hmm. And I think, it also lays bare how rapidly things are moving here. So I think that's what makes our current mass extinction events so unprecedented, is that it's not happening over millennia. It's happening over the scales of human lifetimes, over decades. We're seeing the same effects, but much, much faster. And I think that what truly makes this sixth extinction unprecedented in the history of life.
Yeah. I always think that one of the challenges is that we as humans, it's hard for us to, we think of 100 years or 1,000 years is a long period of time. I mean, some people think an hour is a long time.
I know.
So I think we have a hard time.
A week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking at things from a geologic time perspective. Mm-hmm. Too. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
What would you say is the most surprising thing you've discovered over the course of your field work in the Karoo Basin?
That's a hard one, but I guess I would have to say, it goes back to Lystrosaurus for me, because, as I mentioned and we've discussed, it's been this poster child of success and surviving the extinction. And that was actually part of a study where I was trying to look at, all Perma-Triassic species and tracking different diversity dynamics like extinction rate, origination rate, alongside one another over time. Not only to look at the duration of the extinction, but to see how long it took to recover. And, with Lystrosaurus, what was interesting for me was it actually became abundant before the extinction event. And yes, we need to tease apart what it means at species level, because as I mentioned, there's 4 species across this period of time, but, that kind of changes for me, what are we talking about with a disaster taxon? Okay, this animal, when I was coming into this investigation, I thought, oh, a disaster taxon means like it like flourished after the extinction event, you know, and appeared and flourished. But this animal, or at least as a genus, is like flourishing during the extinction event and after. So are the conditions of the extinction event like advantageous to its survival, or was it just taking advantage of like vacant niches in the ecosystem, you know, like that was like an interesting result of my work.
Maybe a more apt name would be survivor taxon, not
disaster taxon. So yeah, and I mean, I guess that goes back to what we were discussing about its, you know, traits that seem to, you know, be present in other survivor taxa. And one of those survivor taxa includes the cynodonts, which are another group of synapsids that we are more closely related to. So mammals evolved from a cynodont, and cynodonts were probably more, you know, what we would think of as like a mammal. Like they probably had fur. They took care of their young in the burrows. So we found fossils of baby cynodonts, like kind of touching like head to head in the burrows, like cuddle together with their parents. You know, although, you know, that does seem to be a trait that goes back into the Permian as well. Some dicynodonts also had evidence of rearing their young in burrows, like a very common dicynodont called Dimetrodon.
But we do think they had fur too.
Yeah, that's not been proven. But I guess what people, or at least scientists who know more about this than me, they have been looking at like pits in the maxilla or the snout, which, you know, had evidence at least of being part of like the nervous system. Like, you know, you have these like nerves in your face that you use to touch and feel. And, you know, some people have suggested those were like the point of like a whisker coming out. So if you have whiskers, do you have fur? You know, maybe, I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, we haven't found like any sort of soft tissue preservation to say definitively. But they were probably warm-blooded, at least more than other synapsid groups.
And a live birth then as well?
That's also a huge mystery. We don't know how any of these synapsids reproduced. We've never found their eggs. We've never found a pregnant synapsid. We have found very tiny infant, like synapsids, like in a burrow or like some sort of nest, you know, like I've mentioned, but never any evidence of how they reproduced. And it's actually very strange to me because we have such amazing preservation of these fossils in the Karoo. So it's just very odd to me that that has not been discovered yet.
Yeah. Never any eggs or pregnant or nothing?
Nothing. And yeah, so if you found that, that would be like instant Nature paper. Yeah.
Do you remember the first fossil that you discovered?
Yeah, I do.
What was it?
I actually still don't know.
Oh, you don't know?
Because, you know, it was actually like a holiday job that I did. I was like a second year at the University of Cape Town, and one of my geology lecturers told me about like a summer job at the Karoo National Park, which is kind of like a 5-hour drive inland from Cape Town. And they were doing a paleo impact assessment of the park. And I joined a paleontologist taking the lead on that. And we were like prospecting in the national park. And yeah, I think it was like my second day in the field. I found, I think it, I still don't know what it what it was, because it was in like a conglomerate, so like I look at like pictures of it. So it was like very, it was, disarticulated piece of bone. But it was, very interesting to me, obviously, because it was my first fossil.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? Maybe the museum like just chucked it out as like a piece of crap, But it went to get prepared at the museum, and I never knew what happened to that fossil. But yeah, it was a really exciting moment for me.
But when was the moment that you decided to become a paleontologist?
On that trip.
Oh, it was on that trip.
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean, because I got my eye in, and we found some beautiful fossils. Like, what's really nice about the Permian in the Karoo is like, taphonomically, you're often just getting like little isolated skulls found in like nodules. So it's like really fun field work. It's like, oh, bloop, pick a little skull, put it in my bag, and just on repeat. So it was really fun, and I just found them so like weird that I never learned about synapsids in school. It was like dinosaurs, and obviously dinosaurs are cool, but these animals were related to us, and I just felt like, wow, I could do this for the rest of my life, and like study and promote these really cool animals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've covered a couple of them already, but what do you think is the most controversial topic within the field of paleontology currently?
Like as a whole?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that depends what you're interested in, I guess. Like, I guess Spinosaurus comes in and out of the news. And, whether there's like one or two species of T-Rex or, but
Is there anything specifically regarding the Karoo Basin that's...
Oh, yeah, with the Karoo, I mean, I think the most controversial, or at least like hotly debated for some time, has been like where the Perma-Triassic boundary is in the Karoo, and whether the Karoo extinction is related to the global end-Permian mass extinction event, and whether it's even a severe event. So, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But I think, the working group that I've been part of have been like pretty good at, tackling those main, like, I guess, points of contention. And I guess, yeah, they were mainly with another working group led by Robert Castaldo. And, I guess his main thing was, we didn't have very good dates when he started, I guess, challenging the placement of the Karoo Perma-Triassic boundary. He was like looking at, I guess the definitions of certain assemblage zones in the Karoo. So before we had good geochronology or dates, people were using biostratigraphy, which, is understandable. And the fossils are very rich and are, divided into these discrete communities, which people have been using to correlate for decades in the Karoo. I guess my PhD advisor, Roger Smith, had placed the boundary at the disappearance of like Permian species and the appearance of Triassic species, So Castaldo's group were claiming that, oh, well, if you have Permian species crossing the boundary, is there an extinction event? Or like, and then also saying like, claiming that the boundary is actually higher up in the succession. So, you know, using that same like logic as well. So yeah, I guess at least in my career, that's probably been the most like controversial topic that I've had to try and navigate and, you know, I guess tackle. Yeah.
What's been the most challenging thing you've faced, either over the course of your career or specifically regarding field work?
I don't know. I guess, you know, I would say I've been quite lucky on like a personal level with like the people I've worked with. But, you know, I think in South Africa, there are issues of like, you know, because we, you know, used to be an apartheid regime and, you know, with the first democratic elections in 1994, obviously there was a lot of like positive, at least for me as a child, like positive reinforcement that like, you know, racism's over now and like we're all like a happy rainbow nation. But, you know, going into science, I did notice that things were not as they seemed, you know. There was still a lot of institutional racism. And, you know, I think a lot of, you know, as I met like other Black researchers and students, I think a lot of them felt like it was still like a white space. So that was probably a difficult thing. That was kind of a difficult thing for me to sort of realize and also like navigate because, you know, there were instances where I had to come to the defense of students or other staff that had, you know, negative experiences. And, you know, just to see how people that, you know, people react in those situations, you know.
What advice would you have to a young person that maybe would be considering a career in paleontology?
I guess like, yeah, that's kind of a hard one, to be honest, because I mean, I've obviously overall I've loved being a paleontologist, and you know, I think I've never been someone who wanted a 9 to 5 job, and I kind of saw it as like a way of not like buying into, you know, that system, you know. But unfortunately, we all work in a capitalist system, and you know, it doesn't pay well. You can find yourself in like kind of precarious positions where you're not paid well and you don't have security, you know, like I've been on like 2 3 year contracts, you know, since my PhD ended. So, and while you're, you know, you're having to publish your work, you're also having to like look for jobs and interview for jobs, and you may have to make sacrifices on like location or being near your family, which I did, you know, and that's been hard. So yeah, it's a tough gig, you know. So like, I don't think you can say to people like, oh, just stick it out. You know, people may not be able to always just stick it out, you know. And they haven't failed by not doing that.
But changing, yeah.
Yeah, you know.
What do you miss most from South Africa, living here?
I mean, I miss being near my family.
Yeah.
And I also miss being near my field sites.
Yeah.
I definitely used to go in the field a lot more. You know, I could just, you know, get in a car and drive a few hours and I'd be at my field sites, you know, so that was really nice. Now I have to like get on a plane and like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, what is a synapsid?
Yeah. So synapsids are a group of animals that, include mammals. Mammals are the only living group of synapsids, but their history goes back to, the very early Permian, so about, 300 million years ago, to an animal you may not even think of as being, anything other than a dinosaur. But this animal, Dimetrodon, had like a big sail back. You probably heard of it. People often put it in like kids' dinosaur books. I have to read to my own kids books about dinosaurs, and there's Dimetrodon, but Dimetrodon is not a dinosaur. It's a synapsid. It's actually one of the first synapsids to appear in the fossil record. And I mean, it definitely looked more reptilian. It almost certainly had scales. It had like a, like a squat posture and walked very much like a lizard, like side to side. But then evolving from a group of Dimetrodon-like animals, which were called the Synacodonts, evolved a group of synapsids called the Therapsids. And these animals are, the synapsids that we see in the Karoo Basin that dominate the middle to late Permian. And they kind of had a mix of traits. So they would have been slightly more upright in their posture, and not so much waddling in their walking pace. But they were, I guess, more getting closer to what we would understand as like a mammal. And then evolving from that group were the cynodonts. And this is the group that mammals evolved from. So cynodonts may or may have not had fur, but definitely an animal that evolved from a cynodont-like synapsid was the first true mammal. So I don't know if that is...
And the first mammal, we believe, was a something small, similar to like a rodent of some kind.
Yeah, I guess some people, like a rodent or a shrew. Like Morganucodon is probably the most well-known first mammal. And they would have been extremely tiny, like you could have held it in your hand. That's like how tiny it was. In the Karoo Basin, there's like a similar animal called Megazostrodon, which comes from the very earliest Jurassic part of the stratigraphy, which is also a very fun part of the sequence to study. I did dabble in the end Triassic mass extinction event, and that's when we see the first like dinosaur-dominated communities appearing in the fossil record in the very earliest Jurassic. And that's like, the point in time between the appearance of dinosaurs, or at least like their domination in the rock record, and the latest Permian is like over 50 million years. So, it's a lot of time.
Yeah. So what is the major difference between what would be considered dinosaur and this precursor to mammals then?
Oh, in what way do you mean?
For example, how it's that species, I already forgot the name of it, with the sail.
Oh, Dimetrodon?
Yeah, Dimetrodon. Yeah. What would be the difference between Dimetrodon? Why is that not considered a dinosaur then?
It's a number of like, I guess, anatomical differences, particularly in the skull, that just show a different evolutionary ancestry. So if you go back to even before Dimetrodon, you have the first land animals come onto land, and they're called the amniotes. So they're amniotes because their what they can do is lay like hard-shelled eggs. They don't need to go back to the water like amphibians and, do part of their life cycle in the water. They can lay a hard-shelled egg on land, so like bring their pond with them basically, and rear their young in, or like their young can develop in an egg and hatch. But then after that point, two major splits occur in amniotes. One becomes the reptiles, and the reptiles evolve into snakes and lizards, but also archosaurs, which include crocodiles, pterosaurs, which are the flying reptiles that people also often lump into dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And then true dinosaurs, which, and then, so the other line is the synapsids that later become mammals. But yes, they had a common ancestor being amniotes.
What are some of the technologies that you currently use to analyze fossils from the Karoo?
I guess the most common or popular, I guess, at the moment is like doing like scanning, so synchrotron scanning. There's like a large synchrotron scanner in like Grenoble, the European synchrotron, and that's like really in at the moment. People scanning fossils to look at like, either like putting it back together if it's like a really crushed specimen, so you can like create like, it'll put all the bones in like the anatomically correct position for you. You can, I should say, like you can take that data back and segment it and then put it back together. And then also to just look at internal structures like the brain or the inner ear, because there's just a lot of like work being done on like brain cases, and also like the inner ear morphology to look at like lifestyle predictions on like how they lived.
And it can create a 3D model.
Yeah, exactly. So like the spinning skulls people like to use in their papers and in their talks.
People like that,
yeah. But surface scanning is also, like I was actually part of a recent study that did some surface scanning of some of the fossils in Evolving Planet here to look at like estimating body mass. So yeah.
Are there any fossil sites that you would like to visit or dream of visiting that you have yet to visit?
Yes, obviously. I mean, I would love to go see the Perma-Triassic in Russia one day. And also China has an amazing record too. It just seems to be a bit more disrupted, like, or at least people I know who work there like struggle to find a complete section across the boundary. It's either like Permian or Triassic, but also amazing, rich Perma-Triassic sites there. Mainly the marine record is what China is well known for. And the marine sections there are actually what people use as a touchstone for timing the extinction globally. That's all in China.
And are there any, or do we know of any animal species that survived multiple extinction events?
I mean, probably not like as a genus, but I mean that's got to happen in some way, otherwise like we wouldn't be here. So I mean the cynodonts eventually, for example, do go extinct, but their descendants, obviously they lived on, otherwise we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess you could even argue that like, I mean, actually probably a good example are the crocodilians. They were like I mean, once the end-Permian extinction happened, Triassic ecosystems were very different in the sense that they became reptile dominated, which just had not, that was like the first time that happened. And people think, oh, okay, well, that was when dinosaurs evolved and became dominant, right? Nope. It was actually the crocodilians that became dominant first. And they became a bunch of really weird, cool animals too. Like they were bipedal crocodiles, like meat eating and herbivorous. They were oceanic crocodiles, marine ones. They were like these bulldozer type, like armadillo-like crocodiles that dug up roots probably and ate. They were vegetarian. And then there were these very like gracile, like almost like greyhound like fast running terrestrial crocodiles. So they were not like crocodiles that we think of as now. Like crocodiles as we see them now is actually is like quite a derived form of crocodile. But these animals actually terrorized the first dinosaurs because the first dinosaurs were kind of small animals, probably not more than like the size of a turkey or something,
Yeah.
And they were these large, like predatory bipedal crocodiles, like, tormenting them.
Yeah.
And then they went extinct at the end of the Triassic. There was some evolution of like, I guess diversification of dinosaurs happening at the end of the Triassic. But it only really ramped up when these crocodilians went extinct at the end of the Triassic. Yeah. So if you like Jurassic Park without feathered dinosaurs, then you would have loved these like crocodilians. Because unfortunately, a lot of the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park should have had feathers, like Velociraptor, Dilophosaurus. So yeah.
Not particularly accurate. What are some life lessons that you've learned through your studies in paleontology?
Life lessons. I mean, yeah. I don't know. I don't want to sound like a Buddhist, but like, I guess maybe it's not like the right thing to even say. But I guess I like doing what I do because it is a reminder of like how we are connected to everything on this planet, that we all actually depend on each other and we depend on, other living things on this planet for our existence, And I think many people kind of lose their connection to the natural world in modern society, and I think that's maybe the one thing that I think is like a good thing that people could learn from what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is that feeling like when you uncover a fossil that hasn't seen the light of day in billions of years?
Yeah, I mean, people ask that question a lot, like, it is like really exciting because you could, for a moment, it could be something completely new to science. I think that is like the main excitement. You're like, oh, what have I found?
Yeah.
Is this a new thing?
And have you discovered some new species to science?
Yeah, I have actually. I think the newest thing was like I found like a fossil that became the first known Aedosaur from South Africa. It's like not a very pretty fossil, but and then when I found it, like it was ventral up the skull, and the teeth were they were eroded out, but it looked like like mammalian. It looked like, when I found it, I was like, this looks like, maybe it's like a cynodont, but it's like a really big cynodont.
Yeah.
So like, I was like, that's cool, could be new. But it was like not even a cynodont. It was one of these weird crocodilians I was telling you about. So that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't the person who found this fossil, but I'm also was part of a collaboration that at least wrote up the first record of a phytosaur from sub-Saharan Africa. So phytosaurs are also weird because people are like, oh, this is a crocodile. Because it does, it looks just like a crocodile. And they lived in the Triassic. But as I explained, like the true crocodilians were all these like diverse terrestrial animals. Phytosaurs were kind of distantly related. They were sort of lower or more like closer to the evolution, like to this branching off of archosaurs, right? So they were kind of like a sister group to crocodiles, but they kind of occupied a niche that modern crocodiles now have today. So yeah, and they were only known from, I guess the most famous sites where phytosaurs are found today is like the Chinle Formation in the US. Like, yeah, so it was exciting to find it in sub-Saharan Africa. So this site was actually in Zimbabwe because there we actually see a very similar environment on the other side of the world at like the same period of time.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And it's the same, like, I mean, we don't know exactly the age, but at least of like the latest Triassic in the Karoo Basin, but those animals have never been found there. So there may be like a latitudinal like restriction to their range as well.
How has your work studying paleontology impacted your humanity?
Maybe in line with what I said about that, like that we all connected. Yeah, I think it really does remind me every day how every living thing is connected, and that's not, that can sound very like hippie or cheesy, but I think that does like give me like a respect for life, all life. Yeah,
I think that's very true. Yeah. Where do you see yourself in 5 years from now?
I don't know, but I hope still in paleontology. um, so yeah.
Yeah.
I think if I got the chance to go back to South Africa, I would take that. Yeah, I think I would like to go back home and yeah, be closer to my field sites.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you hope your legacy will be?
I think for me, obviously, we all want to have our research published in high impact journals and stuff, but I think I would actually like my legacy be to more like show that I was an inclusive researcher, and I feel like I've really tried to make that part of the success of my own research in my grant writing, and by including like students from like South Africa in my current NSF grant. Also trying to like upskill research technicians like fossil preparators. I've been part of like programs through a museum in Cape Town, a Zico museum, where we're working with fossil technicians there to do like research exchange at the field museum and vice versa. And yeah, also just that company is called Paleolink, or program is called Paleolink. And another group is Puppet Planet. So that's more aimed at kids. But we're trying to make like tiered outreach where that's accessible to not only like young kids in South Africa, but also kids that like come from disadvantaged backgrounds and where English isn't their first language. So we like are, just trying to make science more inclusive to like, traditionally disadvantaged groups, particularly like Black communities in South Africa through that program. Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's sort of like what I hope. Yeah, that's like as important to me as the research. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, Pia, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for the time.
Oh yeah, thanks so much, Paul. I loved this. It was nice to talk to you.
Wait, one last question. Are you a Springbok fan?
I guess I have to be, right?
Right? You can't be on camera and not admit
like
that.
World champions. So like not once, but twice.
Right.
Maybe more, I think. Maybe I'm like showing I'm not such a good Springbok fan.
At least twice.
At least twice.
Right.